Hello and welcome to Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Furrow. I'm Karen McCarthy. On the program this week, staying in touch, the rural press. We look at its past, where it's at and what's its future. The traditional versus new technology, which do you prefer? In Britain, it's been called a scandal. Interest rate swaps. Have farmers been taken for a ride by their banks, sucked in by the hard sell, now locked into paying rates on loans way over the odds? And the latest on the Matrix mutant calf scandal, livestock improvement standing firm against mounting farmer calls for compensation. Now the feds are involved. In the studio with me this week, a rural press deadly duo from Dairy Exporter magazine, editor Glenys Christian, a long-time agricultural journalist, welcome. And from the weekly rural newspaper Straight Furrow, our much appreciated sponsor. We've dragged him away from his desk, Jeff Smith. Thanks for being with us. Listen, let's talk these interest rate swaps, I think, first up. Only making headlines, several years after the fact. A complex deals from the sounds of things. Is it a scandal, Jeff?
It's yet to be seen if it's a scandal.
The British are certainly sort of dealing to it that way, aren't they?
Yes, it's only coming to light right now. And it's been going on 5 years. The banks have backed off them, but they sold them over a period of 3 years. Farmers have been very embarrassed by it, and I think that's one of the reasons it hasn't come out, that they don't want to have been seen to have had their fingers burned. I think it's gaining momentum since it was made public. I know the Commerce Commission are making an investigation into whether they need to make an investigation. If that happens, I'm sure there'll be lots coming out. Our paper particularly, so we ran a lot of stories in the latest issue. We've got more people ringing us up preparing to talk, so it's a work in progress. Well,
why are farmers a bit slow to come forward to talk about this? Because obviously there's a lot of people being burned by these interest rate swaps. Glenys, is it an embarrassment factor?
I think, yes, as Jeff said, that is part of it. I also think that from the sounds of it, many farmers may not realise this is actually what they have.
That's right.
They may think they've got something completely different, and it's only when they're actually checking with their bankers or with financial advisors that the truth will come to light. And I totally agree with Jeff. I mean, it's a scenario that's likely to be played out over quite some time. I think it would be good if the Commerce Commission did get involved, because that would certainly speed up that process, wouldn't it?
You're saying some sort of an inquiry. We need an inquiry.
Well, to see the full extent of what's involved, because otherwise I think there is a risk that these farmers could be sort of picked off individually, if you like, and told you'll get the best deal by sort of keeping quiet and not making too much of a fuss. Other farmers need to be aware of what's happened.
Do we know, Jeff, whether there's any kind of tacit pressure being put on farmers to keep quiet about this?
Well, there's always pressure from the bank. There's always pressure from the bank.
If they've got you by
I think the interesting thing is that a lot of the farmers who bought them actually thought they were some form of insurance policy. If anything was to be done, it would have to be done under the Fair Trading Act. Often it's been said that the people who were selling, even the bankers who were selling them, didn't fully understand them. But if that is under the Fair Trading Act, anything that's happened over 3 years ago can't be touched because the statute of limitations comes in, so there's a long way to go.
Yes, yeah. And there's obviously the scenario there too that with the turnover of staff at banks and moves of various sorts, the same people who were out there perhaps suggesting and selling these instruments to farmers, they'll no longer be with those organisations, and perhaps that will give the banks an out. So that's all the more reason to have something more wide-ranging by way of an inquiry.
They're calling this mis-selling by the banks. What exactly does that mean?
Well, I think was what I said there. The mis-selling concept comes in that farmers thought they were buying some form of insurance over their mortgage.
And they were too quick to sign on the dotted line?
Well, whether they're too quick or not remains to be seen. We've had reports that lots of farmers are very happy with them, so maybe the people we're hearing from are a minority. So,
when rates fell, that's the thing, these swaps, as you say, were maybe sold as insurance against interest rate rises, but when the rates fell, is this right, the farmers have been left locked in to high loans, high interest loans that they can't break. Is that part of the problem? They can't get out of
it.
it. And do we have any idea what the interest rates are, or the kind of
I know one farmer said his interest rates went up to over 9%. His interest bill for the year was $1 million plus. So we're talking big numbers, but whether we're talking big numbers of farmers is another story.
Have the banks acted illegally?
There's no suggestion of that, even by the farmers.
Unethically, perhaps? I mean, there's mention, as Jeff has made, that perhaps some of these rural managers who are out there selling this product, for want of a better word, didn't really have a grip on what they were selling.
Well, when you mentioned the word before, mis-selling, I mean, that speaks to me of people who misspeak, lie. And it may have been that these people were given the information, told to go out and sell on this basis. That's exactly what they did. But if it turns out that these instruments weren't as farmers thought they were, they delivered something different to them than they thought they were signing up for, there has to be an element of that there, doesn't there?
And the swaps, I've also read, were a commercial instrument usually used for large, sophisticated companies, not for family farms. So
they were based on the derivatives that brought down the American banking system, and your comment about honest banks, so that's an oxymoron if ever I heard it.
And the thing is, your average farmer isn't a money market dealer, he's not a financial expert, and they don't have the expertise, or I suppose the time to maybe go into these kind of things as thoroughly.
Well, they're often relying on one bank and one advisor from that bank. They're not generally going out there and speaking to other financial advisors unless they are very large scale, or unless they have a different corporate ownership model, perhaps with a board that meets and there are other directors who would have input to this side of things. So they're very much in the hands of one bank and perhaps one advisor, and this may be where some of the difficulty has come through.
And trust is such a huge part of rural banking,
Absolutely.
I suppose.
Absolutely.
That's where some of these guys have fallen over.
Yeah, and the bank tells you to do something. Generally, farmers do it. Yeah, they are so often debt-laden that there isn't the option to say, well, look, I'll shop around, or I'll consider that, or look at doing something else. They are very much in a position of the bank calls the shots.
I mean, you've had Crafer on this show. He explained that situation perfectly, how the banks just kept lending him money.
Throwing money at him.
And they've done that with lots of farmers.
What about some sort of mass action? Is there any chance, do you think, of farmers getting together, if there are enough in terms of strength in numbers, some sort of class action lawsuit against the banks? Is that something they could contemplate?
I can't see that. We don't know how big it's going to be, and nobody has claimed at all that the banks have done anything illegal.
What about the old caveat emptor, let the buyer beware? I mean, you go and sign an agreement. Sometimes it's going to work out in your favour, sometimes it's not. Is it just, suck it up?
Well, buyer beware, yes, buyer beware by all means. And they put their trust in their bank. They mightn't trust the bank anymore, but the banker advisor is very much like the stock agent used to be among farmers, that they were a confidant and trusted and everything else, but it seems to have gone beyond that.
A bit of a hard lesson to learn. Coming up, where do you prefer to source your industry information? How do you like to stay in touch? Still sitting around the kitchen table with the newspapers, or are you out in the paddock glued to your smartphone? We ask, what do farmers want by way of information? And is the rural media market oversaturated? Stay with us for more Straight Talk. Welcome back to Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Furrow. I'm Karen McCarthy. We're back with rural journalists Jeff Smith and Glenys Christian. Let's talk rural media. You guys, I don't know how many decades you must have racked up between you. When did you start your careers in agricultural journalism?
Too long ago to remember.
Long time.
1965 I started, so there you can work that out.
And ever
47
left?
years.
Ever left, or have you stayed with it all these years?
I have, and I think that's the case for a lot of people who get involved in rural journalism. They enjoy dealing with farmers. They like to be out there and experiencing that sort of level of the industry and what's happening. Never a shortage of news, eh, Jeff?
No.
And they tend to stay with it, as we've done.
And you fought 40-odd years. What keeps you getting out of bed in the morning?
The bills. No, I come from a farming background, and I haven't always been in rural journalism. I've been in all manner of journalism, but certainly it's one of the most rewarding.
And it's an important role. I mean, you look at the important place the agriculture plays to this economy, and there's a hungry market out there, isn't there? There are farmers that need and want up-to-date information. They want to know what's going on. They want to keep plugged in.
Absolutely, and I think farmers are very well served by the amount of different media sources that they have and the reliability of that information that's going in front of them. It's not all sort of flash and dash and shock horror probe type headlines. It's generally well researched, well put together information that they can use in their businesses, and that's what they're after.
Farmers are indeed well served. Is it possible that they're too well served? Could it be said there's an overabundance of rural media? Is the market cluttered, Jeff?
No, I don't think so. I look at it this way, that all the publications that I'm aware of, the weeklies, the monthlies, all serve a different purpose. They all have a different approach. Some approach it business-wise, other publications product-wise, but none is the same. None is the same.
And Dairy Exporter, is that a relatively recent?
No,
it's
1926. We've been around for a very long time. And so has Straight Furrow.
Yes.
So that speaks to the fact that farmers rely on publications that they're familiar with. My father, for example, he remembered my grandmother reading the Dairy Exporter when they were farming out of Nelson. So that's stickability.
Is it subscription, or do people buy this off the shelf?
Subscription now. It didn't used to be.
And numbers are good.
Yes, yeah. Farmers rely on that source of information because they've had it coming into the household for a very long time, and that's what they want to continue. They've got all these other sources of information, you're mentioning before with smartphones and looking up web-based services, TV, radio. They're very well served in that regard. And I think, as Jeff says, they put all that information together and they select from it what best suits their needs and requirements.
Because tradition is all very well. That's the thing, these papers have been around for decades. Tradition, comfort, the familiar. There are so many other options out there, and as you mentioned, the web, the digital media. Is that seen as a threat at all, or is there room for everything, Jeff?
Well, I don't see at this stage the web being any form of a threat to the written publication. Different to newspapers. Farmers far prefer to pick that up and read it. They don't go to their smartphone to read news or to read lengthy articles. And don't forget, the average farmer's well into his late 50s, and they are still media shy as far as computers are concerned.
Quite old school.
I don't know, I sort of object to that old school bit. They don't go to the laptop or the home computer for the news. They like their news information that these can offer. Yeah, sure, they'll go to the smartphone for a GPS tracking or for a weather forecast or an update or so forth. Yeah, that's the big coming thing with smartphones, but I don't see smartphones, simply because of their sheer size, and I don't see them taking over from the written publication.
Is that what you're hearing, Glenys?
Yes, I feel it's the same. I agree with Jeff. And the message that we get from our readers is they like to digest that information in their own time, at their own pace. Dairy farmers, they're getting up, 4:30, 5 in the morning. They'll have a cup of tea before they go out to the milking shed. They'll read a couple of pages of the Dairy Exporter. They'll come in the evening after a busy day out. They'll have dinner with the family. They might be logging on, looking at, perhaps milk information on the computer, but then they might go to bed and again they might read a couple more pages. So
of the Dairyman.
Oh, well, that could be the case too. But they are able to pick up that information and access it at a time and a pace that suits them. And I don't think that's going to alter.
New technology too, I guess that's so dependent on the internet, your high-speed broadband access, and that is still a bugbear for a lot of people in the rural sector, as they just can't get, or they still don't have, that high-speed broadband. Is that an issue out there still?
But
for
smartphones are overcoming that, you see. They're not reliant
on broadband.
On the broadband. The smartphones are instant, and they are growing hugely in popularity with farmers. With dairy farmers can do all sorts of operations with them. You know, you can open gates, you can turn on irrigators, all that sort of stuff. That's totally different to a laptop.
Is that kind of technology made for a farm, though, when you think of, you know, can you have it lying around in the milking shed on the back of a tractor?
They're pretty robust these days, and that's what the designers of these devices are really looking for now. Something that a farmer can toss up on the dashboard of their ute when they're out around the farm, or take with them on the ATV, that's not going to get damaged, or and it's got a screen that's readable, even if it gets smeared with a bit of cow manure or whatever.
Or gets dropped. And
no
water, they're waterproof. You see the new tractors with the setup that they've got on them. The guy's got an iPad there, he's got his iPhone there, and his GPS there and so forth. Well, you just sit there all day and look at those, because the tractors can drive themselves now. So, yeah.
But as Glenys says, they still want to get home at the end of the day and put their feet up at the kitchen table or whatever with their paper or their magazine.
Yes, I think that's very much the case. And you've got to remember too, there's a lot of regional publications out there that farmers read avidly, because that's news about their local area, what the guy down the road is doing. That's always of most interest to farmers.
What about the mainstream media in terms of, you know, the farming supplements each week, or the farming sections? Do they give rural this is the non-specialised publications, do the dailies give the rural sector the attention and I guess more importantly than that, the analysis that it deserves?
Well, in some cases, I think they do it very well. The Dominion Post, I mean, John Morgan's pages.
And the press.
They are very well read. They are absolutely fitting to that market. And the key to their success, I believe, is that those stories can be read by farmers and by non-farmers, and they'll be getting slightly different information from them, but they enjoy them. They're a good read, and that's what you've got to be thinking about being in our business.
And as you pointed out earlier, it's not just the quantity of the information, it's the quality. Farmers are quick to, their BS radars are pretty good, and they know if they're getting information that's good and sound and independent, I suppose, as well as honest. Yes,
they're wanting something that they can rely on. And when you're talking before about analysis, yes, I can see that there is perhaps a case with web-based programs or information of that sort that can come out in that way, where farmers will be wanting a small piece of information, some reliable analysis from an expert of some sort on that. But what they're looking for in the written word is more around that, more information around it, more discussion and different views perhaps. But independence is incredibly important.
I think just a case in point this year, the discussion, the debate about TAF farmers were pretty much kept in the dark a lot of the time, I think, and they would have been searching for information, and the rural press would have played a big part in spreading the word. Jeff, on that?
I beg to differ on that a bit. I think farmers were kept very well informed about TAF, certainly by Fonterra, who was promoting it. The thing about TAF that got was the naysayers got amazing amount of traction, because the mainstream media are not interested basically in harmony or good news type stories. Bad news stories are the easiest stories in the world to write.
That's true, isn't it? Conflict
You
sells.
watch every time the global dairy trade price drops. Oh, woe is me, the country's going to go broke, there's not going to be that much money. Next month it changes, you know, and it's too easy to write, okay? And when all's said and done, you're talking about something 12 months out. That is an objection I have to mainstream media, that they grab on the dirty dairying. Okay, sure, there's some dirty dairying.
The cheap shots.
Well, it's easy to write. I mean, an accident, a motor accident's the easiest thing to write about, isn't it? Because it's all there right in front of you and you don't have to analyse anything. Dairy prices drop. Oh, gee, that's easy. Woe is me. Woe is us.
Which is where the publications that you both work for and others like them are so important, those specialist publications that are going to give you the context and the depth, I suppose, that you might not get in the mainstream papers.
And coming back to TAF, I mean, farmers had a lot of information. They were saturated with information about TAF. Some of them found it very difficult to wade through that to find out what they really needed to know. It was too big a ask for the daily media to really sift out some of those arguments, I think. So that was why there was that traction from the anti-TAF group, who were putting across quite simple messages that farmers liked what they heard when they heard the arguments being reduced to that simplicity level.
More from our guests after the break, including their take on the matrix mutant calves case. Federated farmers now on the bandwagon, pushing the case for farmer compensation. Come back soon for more Straight Talk. Hello, you're back with Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Furrow, with our guests Glenys Christian and Jeff Smith. This matrix matter, Livestock Improvement Corporation has been standing firm against calls for compensation for farmers with these, for want of a better term, hairy mutant calves from the bull matrix. Where is this heading, do you think, Jeff?
Well, we should know something today. There was a meeting yesterday. I think they've already made the gesture of compensation, after saying very firmly that they wouldn't. Then 3 days later they've offered the services that they supplied to be recompensed. Maybe they'll come out with another offer. So I'm sorry, it's not a thing I can get very excited about, hairy calves.
Yeah, and not many of them, I guess, I suppose. That's a thing, numbers, in terms of numbers.
There's quite a few. There's quite a few, Glenys.
Yes, and they're spread over the country, as I understand it. There's been quite a few down south.
In excess of $1 million compensation if they're going to compensate for every resultant mutant hairy calf. Doesn't that sound great?
It's what's happened. You know, that's the thing. That's what farmers have got on their hands. And I guess that's the thing. If you've ended up with some of these beasts, then that they're useless to you, aren't they? And they do stand to lose quite a lot.
It's also quite a different situation, I think, than just a straight commercial transaction, because you're dealing with cooperative here. And the farmers who have used the semen to produce these calves, they're shareholders in that cooperative, and they will feel that they need to be treated more than just customers. That will be where their emphasis is placed. And I guess it's to be seen how well a cooperative system works that matter out. For example, with Fonterra, a cooperative, when there are problems with collection of milk, they say that the farmer whose milk can't be collected, all the other members of the cooperative will basically chip in order that that farmer is paid for their milk. So I guess some of these farmers will be making the same argument with LIC, and it depends, what credit is given to those arguments at that level.
It's going to be interesting to see what course of action they take, because I guess that is a thing, is that all the members be levied or pitch in, as you say, to kind of pay out these farmers that are affected.
But if you take it to its logical conclusion, they're only going to be suing themselves and paying themselves back. So I don't know where the financial compensation is really going to come into it.
It's going to be interesting.
It's a convoluted matter, but it's something where I think LIC has really got to sort out the solution. I'm not certain that it's something that federated farmers perhaps should have got so involved in. Might have been better to leave it for a little longer. Obviously, some of these farmers are pretty hot under the collar about this. This is why they've gone to the Federation, why they've said, can't you put a bit of pressure on? Remains to be seen how successful they'll be.
And what about any young share milkers who are caught up in this, who might be struggling financially to replace the animals they've got that are now no good to them? What about the cost to those guys and their futures?
It's a pretty serious situation. If they've got a number of these calves, they're looking at a lower payout season this season. Their finances will have already been under the microscope a couple of times as payouts have dropped. This is absolutely what they don't need.
And again, Jeff, this, I guess, let the buyer beware. It's a classic case, perhaps. This is all new ground, new territory, genomics and breeding, and there's always going to be risk, I suppose, that things aren't going to go according to plan.
Well, it's the technology of today, and it seems to be pretty successful up until now. I don't know what the alternatives is. what the alternative could be. I mean, okay, they've had one slip-up, it's affected a lot of people, but I don't see that they can apportion any sort of a blame.
They're saying it's a naturally occurring genetic mutation as well. It's not as if somebody made a mistake. It's just one of those things that happens from time to time.
Yeah, and there have been cases before. I remember going back about 15 years ago with another genetics company, not LIC, had a similar problem with one of their bulls. Generally, these matters get sorted out in some way. It's not going to be to the satisfaction of all farmers involved, but as long as it can satisfy most of them, that's the best outcome.
You've been watching Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Furrow. Thank you to my guests this week, Glenys Christian and Jeff Smith, and as always to you at home for watching. If you'd like to get in touch, check out our website, country99tv.co.nz, for information on all our programs. Always good to hear from you. I'm Karen McCarthy, back next week with more Straight Talk.